We're going to continue on the Bitcoin layers era and welcome up our next panel to talk about securing blockchains in the era of Bitcoin layer 2s. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for our next panel and their moderator, Charlie of Blockspace Media.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for coming. Nashville's pretty cool, everybody. We'll skip intros. I'll do it for you. Drake from Figment, Keith from SNZ Capital, Gaetan from Blockdaemon, and Jake from Bitcoin Frontier Fund. I'm Charlie Spears with Blockspace Media. We're talking about staking as a service and the business of layer 2s and securing those. But just to lay some groundwork, Drake, I'm going to throw it to you. Explain to the audience, what is a staking service provider?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we all know, Bitcoin proof of work, Ethereum, Solana, Cosmos, many of the other kind of major L1s, proof of stake, right? It's analogous in that you're still operating some kind of a computer that's helping secure consensus, produce new blocks, but it's a little different, right? Basically, what a staking service provider like Figment or Blockdaemon does is operate validator nodes that you then have external parties or internal capital stake their digital assets to. Protocols have kind of built-in inflation and transaction rewards. It basically spits off new tokens to people that are staking to your node. And you're incentivized to maintain liveness and not get slashed and all that good stuff.
So we're coming out of a bear market, and I would say it's been a bear market for a lot of proof-of-stake chains, but we've got a great cross-section of folks who've been deploying capital and operating this space. We've got the capital side, Jake and Keith, and we've got the staking as a service and the operation side, Gaetan and Drake. But now we're doing staking on Bitcoin layer 2. This changes things. I wonder, and I'm going to open this up to anyone, is the business model change at all from an operations standpoint? Is this broader crypto services that you guys have provided, is it different when we look at Bitcoin?
You want to start? Gaetan?
I'll throw it to Gaetan.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. You guys can hear? Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, it is a bit different because obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum or other ecosystems have different consensus mechanism, i.e. different security mechanisms, and also different market cap, which ultimately for a lot of these protocols is correlated to the level of security. And Bitcoin by far is, I think anybody could mathematically argue that it's the most secure one. And so from that perspective, it differentiates. From a pure infrastructure standpoint, though, it's very similar. We still apply a lot of the same processes when it comes to key management for our customers, when it comes to funds management for customers, from a, kind of the set of operations that are needed to secure Ethereum from a validator standpoint or Bitcoin stacks from a signer standpoint, sort of requires the same level of commitment and professionalism from infrastructure partner like Figment or Blockdaemon. So I would say at the core, the protocols are obviously different. From a pure infra standpoint, there are nuances that are slightly different, but generally the same level of security is applied to it.
For proof of work cryptocurrencies, the competitive advantage is typically your cost of production, your energy. And this is different for the staking world. What makes a staking as a service provider competitive? I'll throw this to maybe Keith or Drake.
For the stakers, I think one is kind of like the safety. I think a security issue, just like previously the two guys mentioned, in infrastructure-wise, Bitcoin and Ethereum, that's totally different, right? So the data structure is different. There's a UDXO. The other one is more like a ledger, like a smart contract-wise. So also the operation-wise is a little bit different. Like in Bitcoin, you don't have like a smart contracts. You only have a bunch of scripts. And Ethereum is more like smart contract-wise. In staking-wise, you have to apply in Ethereum so-called slash mechanism But in Bitcoin, we're yet exploring the slash mechanism. Even in Babylon and in all kinds of other layer twos, all facing the same issue using multi-sig. To evaluate what a good staking mechanism, I think you had listed to solve these problems before actually people have confidence in your ecosystem or put their assets in your network, right? So that's my point of view.
Yeah, you have any thoughts, Drake?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think first and foremost, any staker's first question is the safety one, right? On Ethereum or some of these other protocols, when you behave badly, when you try to be malicious, even if your node just breaks down, some of that staked asset can be slashed. So you're losing some of that principal that you're putting up. And obviously, that's less than ideal. Beyond that, once you kind of have the security question figured out, I think it comes down to some of the product offering that your staking service provider offers, the rate they're charging on stake rewards. It kind of becomes a little bit more like serving a customer type of business.
And yeah, go for it, Jake.
Well, sorry to take you're the moderator.
No, you throw a question.
But I'm curious for you guys, for all the ETH L2s, how many of them are proof of stake and have a staking component? Like, is it 50? Is it 80? Like, what's the rough number, do you know?
The vast majority, I would say.
Of ETH L2s?
Yeah.
But most are using like a single centralized sequencer.
Yeah.
So like you can stake on Arbitrum, but it's just DeFi staking versus like a protocol staking.
Got it.
And you get into semantics with some of this stuff for sure.
Well, the reason I ask is because one of the big differences between ETH and Bitcoin is that you have to have a token to stake.
Right.
And Bitcoin's aversion to tokens, especially pre-ordinals, made that pie very small. And so you do all these weird, wonky things with multi-sigs and cryptographic, like locking up tokens, or federations. So that's like the two main ones that have been dominant. This proof of stake thing is actually a newer development. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and it seems that we are in an era of considerable L2 proliferation. There's 80 plus self-described Bitcoin L2s out there. Many of them want service providers. How do we decide which ones to service? Do we try to do all of them? How do we figure out which ones are worth strategic aligning with? I'll throw this back to you, Gaetan.
Yeah, for us, I think it's a lot of it is market-driven. So customer demand is the number one KPI, i.e., we have a fund, we have a traditional banks, and maybe that's something for folks who are not familiar with Blockdaemon. We've been around since 2017. We run a bunch of different nodes, 200,000 and over across 50 plus blockchains, and so we do have to make decisions in terms of which chains we support when new chains comes up, and so that goes to your point. How do you decide that? And so a lot of it boils down to a large fund or a few customers knock at our door and say, hey, we're invested, we're interested, we're bullish on chain A, B, and C, can you support them? And we do our own due diligence. So we have a team of researchers that do that and decide. But a lot of it comes down to, is there appetite from our customers, which ultimately leads to, is there a business case for us to sustainably support a new chain? Once there is that, then we put in place a lot of the infrastructure that we're good at and very good at doing in place in order to support them. But originally, it usually comes down to customer demand.
So Keith and Jake both represent capital being deployed into these. It can be a little bit overwhelming, like drinking from a fire hose to figure out how many different things are even out there and to evaluate them. I'll throw it to Jake. How do you evaluate the landscape of self-described Bitcoin L2s and staking schemes? What kind of rubric or heuristics are you using?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to differentiate. And a big one right now is like, you have some kind of bridge, and then you do EVM. And the thinking is clear because you can get all the developers from Solidity to come over and build apps quicker. But Bitcoin's unique because Bitcoin script is very limited. And so it's all about locking and unlocking UTXOs. That's at the core level, you have a signature, and you can prove you can spend it, and then it moves, and then it relocks again. And so the first thing is like bridging over into an L2. That's a whole question. No one's figured that out to do it like trustlessly. And then 2 is once you're over there, what's going to bring people over in mass? And that's the $1.4 trillion question that, like, I don't know. There's a bunch of Stacks is doing interesting stuff with Clarity. There's a whole bunch of EVM chains for that. There's some staying UTXO and trying to kind of be interoperable. But it's hard to say. It's a lot of just case by case and watching the market closely and seeing where the builders and the users are going.
Yeah, we'll probably come back to the question of maybe is everything multi-sig and the purpose there. But I'll throw it maybe to Keith. What are your thoughts on this? How do you evaluate deploying capital into this space?
Yeah, I think Jacob is his fund is an expert on Bitcoin 100% focus. So our fund is a little bit different. Our focus is more in general over the crypto space. But definitely I saw different technologies. For our are more like a research or thesis driven. So I will figure out first for our side is how many questions or what's the problems we need to solve actually in this ecosystem. So in Bitcoin, I should say maybe it's people looking at that in a different ways, but some of the core developers may thinking we have to stick to Bitcoin original, right? So, but some of the other degens, we're looking more into, could we bring more diversity to Bitcoin? So there's to our side is nothing right or wrong. It's all about contribution to the ecosystem. But later on is kind of consensus. So for my side is first a few questions I can point it out is one, could we actually program in on the script language in Bitcoin, right? So the other one is could we have a reliable bridge to swap or a wrap or all kinds of things can move Bitcoin liquidity to layer 2s. So far, people are still exploring, but we, like you mentioned, that we are using multi-sig in all kinds of different ways. The third one will be how could we build a true and prosperous layer 2 ecosystem. So that's the reason I think we back Stacks in early days is because we believe that this team has the capability to build this ecosystem. And that, I think, also relates to how do we serve those choose what kind of layer 2s we serve the service. Because if you have business to business, we have business there, then we serve them, right? So I think that's from my point. But still, this morning, and Kyle just mentioned to me a couple of good things. Then there's one team claimed that they can verify ZK proofs in layer 1. So that's kind of an interesting progress. So from all in all, from my side is when you do venture capital to deploy money, then I'm looking into more innovations and can be fundamentally change the ecosystem or make a huge contribution to the ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, and Drake, you are a protocol researcher at Figment, correct? Or what do you call yourself?
My title is Protocol Opportunities Lead.
Gotcha. So in the landscape of protocol opportunities, are you seeing any trends Keith describes trying to evaluate technical innovations? What are you seeing out there right now as far as opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to what Gaetan was saying, you can only support so many chains, right? It's expensive to spin up new nodes. You have to have dedicated DevOps team members, all that sort of folks focused on it. So when we're looking at new opportunities, we think a lot about what is the long-term potential conviction we have in this, right? Ultimately, as a staking provider, you're generally getting paid in tokens. So do we think this token's going to do well? In some ways, it's not dissimilar from making a venture bet. So I think stuff we look at with established tokens, something that we liked about Stacks is that the majority of staking rewards are actually coming from transaction fees rather than token inflation. I believe the entirety, all of Stacks tokens are now unlocked. And there's still, staking rewards have never been higher on Stacks. So that shows real organic usage demand for Blockspace. Yeah.
The transaction fee subject is also an interesting one, especially when we're talking about resolving transaction fees or generating economic activity on Bitcoin's L1, which brings up a bit of an existential question, I think. Is it incumbent upon some of these Bitcoin abstractions to pay for economic security on Bitcoin L1? I'll throw this to Jake, because we've talked about this on your podcast sometimes. What are your thoughts on this topic?
I'm in the camp that it's not required. It's like some people think it's like fees should go back to the mothership and secure the network. I think both are going to coexist perfectly fine. And one way to think about it is like passing fees down is going to be, it's kind of like a minor tax is one way to think about it, versus you could just have a federation or the proof of stake chain siloed, and the pressure it puts on just transactions makes price go up, which makes the block reward more beneficial. So in my opinion, they net out the same. So yeah, I definitely think like if they happen to pass down, that's not a good or a bad. It's just neutral to me.
Yeah, it's like kind of like let the market decide.
Yep.
So speaking of the market, a hot trend in proof of stake world is eigenlayer and restaking. I'll open this up if anyone wants to comment. A lot of people make analogies of like some of these staking or restaking schemes on Bitcoin to eigenlayer. What do you think this looks like on Bitcoin? Are there analogies to draw? Are there opportunities or criticisms to have about this? What do you guys think?
And if you can define restaking in 10 seconds, because I don't know what that means.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Go for it.
So maybe I can start with it. I think at a fundamental level, restaking is shared security. And from that perspective, it's not new. It existed for a while in the Cosmos ecosystem, for those of you interested in Cosmos. Eigenlayer became very famous by attracting a crap ton of capital. And like they're above $19 billion, and that makes them like a flagship project, obviously. And so we're all about, and they coined the term restaking a little bit around it, but that really is, there is an L1, Ethereum or Bitcoin, and you want to derive that security for your own chain, and you want to share the security, essentially. Hence the term of concept of shared security or restaking, i.e. you not only stake, but restake, and they are able to secure that new chain, if you will. So that's from a protocol standpoint. From a user / capital deployer standpoint, you have capital, you want yield, so you stake. You want additional yield, you can restake. And so that also comes with additional risk, because obviously staking, you lock your tokens, secure the network. Restaking, you have the ability to secure a new network. Therefore, you expose your capital to two protocols, i.e. additional risk, right? So additional rewards, additional risk. Pragmatically, or conceptually, that's how I look at the space. Now, does it make sense for Bitcoin? I think as a primitive, as a conceptual mechanism, I think so, given the fact that the market cap, the level of security on Bitcoin is a lot higher than Ethereum. And so I don't see a world where restaking or shared security does not become a reality in the next, 12, 24 months, 3 years.
Yeah, add the point to that is Ethereum and the Bitcoin, fundamentally, the consensus mechanism is different, right? Ethereum previously also using POW, but later on switched to POS, so-called staking. But Bitcoin is still sticking to POW. Then POW, we don't have a staking thing, right? Originally. Mm-hmm. So now we add that to, because the layer 2 and also for yielding purposes, we add in the staking to it. But this staking has nothing to do with the consensus in the bottom level. So that's the fundamental difference. So in Ethereum, the restaking is like the partially they took out the LP token to restake it. That's called a restaking. But in Bitcoin, we only have POW. This staking is only for purpose of like liquidity, all kinds of things. But you put this out as a restaking, then this may be a fundamentally difference. But still, I think the logic can follow similarly as Ethereum. We will see. This is still like an open territory. People are like exploring. But yeah.
So I got 18 seconds, so we'll just get right to it. Just by a show of hands, do you guys think we will have a Bitcoin soft fork in the next, say, 2 years? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It's not going to be off cap by itself, but we will get an upgrade.
Gotcha. Okay. So
Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
we'll see how this goes. All right. Thanks everyone for joining.
All right.
much to our last panel, who just helped to lay the foundation and groundwork for what is happening across the L2 or layer 2 landscape within Bitcoin.